Hello and welcome to the Boston Herald podcast. My very special guest today is Wesley Stace. He's kind of a Renaissance man. I got to see him in concert a few times last year. He's a novelist, critic, journalist, singer-songwriter, recording artist, and occasionally teaches at universities. So welcome.
Hello, Harold.
Good to see you again.
Nice to see you too.
Um, so uh, First of all, I just wanted to just clarify a few things. So your given name is Wesley Stace, correct?
Yes.
There's no middle name or anything?
No, not originally. There is now
Uh-huh.
because back in those days when you kind of needed ID, but not like it is nowadays,
Hmm.
sometimes it was proved because I traveled under John Wesley Harding and someone would get me a hotel reservation under that name. So it
Uh-huh.
was quite, I kind of added the Harding into the Wesley Stace bit after a bit just to try and make life easier.
Okay.
Anyway, tedious.
Um, so uh, um, so there's so many things I want to talk to you about. One of the things is just your recording career. You've had, speaking of being John Wesley Harding and Wesley Stace, you obviously early on were re released things under that name, then Wesley Stace, and then you have the Secret series. You've re-recorded some of your albums under your own name. So I know if you could just explain that whole thing.
Well, so when I started making music, I felt that I was more bound for a life, probably in academia or something,
Hmm.
than I was to be a successful musician.
Hmm.
And so I thought, well, I won't do it under my name. And my manager, I had a manager, and he was like, and I don't know where the name John Wesley Harding came from, but obviously it was because of the coincidence of my name being Wesley, me thinking a pseudonym was a good idea,
Hmm.
and it being there being a Bob Dylan album called that.
Hmm.
So, which was an album, of course, I'd always felt very like when you flip through the albums in the stores
Hmm.
and you're becoming a Dylan fan, and there's one with your back then nobody was called Wesley. It was a very unusual name.
Right.
Now, particularly in England, apart from perhaps West Indian and Caribbean people who I didn't really meet at school.
Hmm.
So it was quite so to see John Wesley Harding and to think, oh wow, Bob Dylan sung a song and that's a coincidence with my name. That was always interesting to me, though I don't think I heard that album for a little while because I didn't have any money and you couldn't hear things everywhere.
Right.
So anyway, so I started making albums under John Wesley Harding. I might not have kept that name for more than 6 months, but I almost immediately got a deal with Demon, and then that led to a deal with Sire, with Seymour Stein, who said, you know, Andy Paley's going to produce your album, and my manager was like, well, the Attractions will be your backing band, and that was very exciting, and all happened very quickly. And then the next 35 years have been a so slow slide from that, and a very enjoyable one. So I made albums under John Wesley Harding for ages with various bands and in various configurations for Sire, a few of them, and then for one for Rhino, and then a couple for an album called label called Zero Hour, and then a couple for Hollywood Records and Mammoth Records, and put out a couple myself, and so on and so forth. But in the early 2000s, I wrote a novel called Misfortune that took me 7 years to write. And I really didn't want it coming out with John Wesley Harding on the spine. For that novel to have been dismissed by reviewers and critics as, or even my friends as something it took me so long and I was so I'd worked so hard on it. And of course, the publishing company, who was Little Brown, and they were like, oh, you should use your music name, of course. I said to my agent, the one thing that I'm not going to do is put the name John Wesley Harding on this novel. And she, went to bat and won. And that which was great. No, she didn't win. She just put forward the right point of view. So the novels came out under Wesley Stace, but I'm still making albums under John Wesley Harding. So at one point, I just went, it's so stupid having these two introductions to me. Like, well, he does this, and I'll just put it all under the name Wesley Stace. Now, everybody knows that when you change your name in the middle of a musical career, that makes life difficult for practically everybody. Your record label, in the old days, they would say, oh, you won't have the right section at Tower. But now it's all about metadata at Spotify, but it leads to the same thing. And so anyway, so it's all a bit muddled, but on the other hand, I don't really care. So I sometimes I'm actually doing a tour in November, and I'm doing it under the name John Wesley Harding. People are like, why are you doing, like, why are you doing that? And it's very simple because the inspiration for the poster was a 1990 for the tour was a 1992 poster of a tour I did with Mayor Winningham, the actor, and we were going to, and she can't do this tour, but we did it on the West Coast, and we used this poster because it was a poster of the two of us in 1992, and it says John Wesley Harding. So there you go.
Yeah, I saw it. It didn't even register. I saw that poster.
Yeah,
Yeah. So also there's a there's Here Comes the Groom,
that was the first band one. Yeah.
right? And then there's this.
Right. So what happened recently was I came up, I could get these all down, but I won't. I had an idea. I've never printed my lyrics on my record. Once I did because the record company told me to, and I thought it would, say yes and be. That was also the same album, by the way, when the guy from the record label says the album cover doesn't look anything like you. And I said, no, that's the poet Arthur Rimbaud. And he said, he took that in and said, you're really not trying to help us, are you? Sorry. A nice guy too, but he just didn't get it. And so I had an idea, and it was nothing to do with Taylor Swift, actually. People keep
It
saying things,
crossed my
oh, is it
mind.
like Taylor's? But I didn't even know a thing about that.
Right,
And
right,
I suppose it's very different because what Taylor Swift's doing is recreating the masters perfectly so she owns them.
right.
Whereas what I'm doing, which was my idea, I've always had a nice schism between making records with a band and going out and playing them solo. I like doing that quite a bit. It's nice to take a band, but you can't always afford it, as our
Right.
friend Robin knows. I mean, it's a very effective thing to do is tour solo.
Uh-huh.
That's how you keep going for years and years is touring solo,
Right.
particularly nowadays. And so I was looking at all the old albums and I thought, oh, be quite interesting to do a project where I like kind of print the lyrics, but also, most importantly, re-record the song solo. Now, when you write a song, unless you make four-track demos, as it were, you write a song solo. But when you record a song, it accretes, is that the right word? It gathers moss. In the recording, it gathers riffs, it gathers a different structure. There's a harmony on it. There's a solo maybe that I wouldn't be able to play on the guitar. So I'm like, how can I replicate that solo? So what those are is they're kind of solo versions of the recorded versions. They take me ages to rehearse, like a full week of full rehearsal, and then I record them in a day. So I've re-recorded the 12 band albums, and it's called the Secret Series. And we did it as a subscription of kind of numbered copies, and it all sold out, which was great. And that more or less funded me recording and making the whole series. And it's been a really fun project, and it ends very shortly. I sent out numbers 10 and 11 to subscribers yesterday, literally. And then the next thing they'll get will be number 12, the CD for number 12, an extra bonus CD that only they get, and a slipcase. Project complete.
Um, and speaking of, so I'm almost done listening to the what's it called the audiobook of Wonder Kid, which is
Right.
uh, I love like every sentence is great. I mean, I love
Oh,
everything
thank
about
you.
it. There's a lot of humor. And there's definitely for music fans, everything from referencing the Ruddles and the Monkeys to what happens at the merch table to referencing some unnamed rock stars who you'll never guess who you're talking about.
Well, yeah. I
Uh,
mean, I'd written, that was the fourth novel of the four that I've written, and I just thought it was time to write something a little bit more contemporary because the other ones have been all quite set in the past.
mhm.
And it's definitely the lightest of the books, but uh, there were things that I wanted to get out. Like, for example, when you have kids, people often expect you to make a kids record.
Mhm.
And that was my version of a kids record because it's kind of about kids' music, if you know what I mean.
Um, and so you were in a. you had a novel called Misfortune, which also did it inspire the CD, or was it the other way around?
Well, the song was on an album called Awake in mid 90s. And then I thought about that song a lot. And I finished the novel about 7 years after that album came out.
And you were and so John Hyatt was the catalyst for you having a contract. Is that true?
No,
No, that's something else.
no, no,
Singer-songwriter. No.
no. Yeah, no. John Hyatt was my first tour of Europe.
Hmm.
Well, my first tour of England was with a band called the Hot House Flowers. And I only got that tour because the bloke next to me said he didn't want to do it because he'd done the last one and it was a failure. And so the bloke looked at me and said, "Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Yes, I would like to do it."
Right.
And so I got a 50 or £100 a night to travel around with the Hot House Flowers. And that kind of led to me being seen by Demon. And that led to my first record deal. But when I was on Asgard, the agency who were doing that, they then put me on tour in Europe with John Hyatt. And that was a phenomenal thing for me because I'd never been to Europe playing the guitar. I was a huge John Hyatt fan at the time. That album was not Bring the Family, it was Slow Turning, the one after that.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I knew those albums inside out. He's not an artist, with all due respect to John Hyatt, that I've found myself loving his work a lot since then. I mean, he's not someone I gravitate towards anymore, but those albums, and indeed the ones before them, Riding with the King and Slugline and Overcoats, I like those albums a lot, a lot. And so it's really exciting to go and be sitting. My first European experience was sitting backstage with lovely Sonny Landreth, showing me a little about slide guitar. It was just dreamy.
Your first few studio albums, one thing I noticed immediately when they came out. I used to work in a record store.
Right.
I got everything came to me. So they were all the first few had Frank Capra related song titles. There's It's a Wonderful Life, Why We Fight, and The Name Above the Title, which is
It
his
happened one night. That's the key one.
um, okay.
Yeah.
I guess the obvious question is, I assume he's a favorite of yours or an influence.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, one's tastes change over the years. And when I was doing English at university, one of my major essays I wrote for the finals was on kind of Frank Capra and American selfhood. And I wrote a lot about American literature as well. I was big writing about Hawthorne, and I wrote a dissertation on Poe and psychoanalysis and detective fiction. And, that was, I loved all and so occasionally you could squeeze a film answer onto there. And I mean, I look at if I look at my kind of music and film books over there, it's mostly film books, to be honest. There's like a Dylan section that's like a third of it. And then there's a music section that's like less than a third. And then there's a very large film section. I think I've always just been very into films. Also, I always loved that Woody Allen thing of just having I know there's a lot not to like about Woody Allen, but that thing of just having the same tedious credits every time. I like that kind of, like when you find out that the UK Subs is a punk band that I love, when you find out that their albums, every single one has been in alphabetical order, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And they've long ago put out 26 of them. They've gone round and round and they keep doing it. I love it when you find a bigger picture like that. So my idea was I just give them another movie title and just have a big picture of my head on the cover forever. But the record company they just wouldn't let me do it. They were like, it looks too much like the last one. I was like, it's my face and it's blue this time behind it. And they were like, it's not, we won't do it.
Um, Now this is something, this may be a false memory, but I remember when first, when you first came on the scene, when you first toured America, was them sort of some sort of visa problem or something?
Yeah, there was a fuck up, and they thought that I hadn't got they thought that my visa hadn't arrived, my work visa, whatever H1B, whatever which one it was,
Mhm.
because I wasn't a citizen.
Mhm.
And so I had to get, it was in the days when you could do this, I suppose. And so I came over to tour on my first tour, which was a three-band bill with the Mighty Lemon Drops and the Ocean Blue. We played at the Paradise, I'm sure.
Mhm.
And I couldn't go on stage for the first three or four, or yeah, I think three or four gigs. I think Philly, New York, and Boston, or something like that. There was then another 2.5 months of the tour, and we came back round again. But so I just went on and told a joke and said I can't play, which I probably legally couldn't have done either. But it then turned out, and this is classic record company stuff, that the visa had been there all along, sitting on somebody's desk, and they just hadn't found it. So suddenly the visa turns up and I can play. It was the silliest thing ever. But it is the kind of thing that makes people remember you very early on in a funny way, because like a lot of people mentioned that 35 years later, and it's like, yeah, well, it's good not to appear as well.
Um, so you've collaborated with many, many people, and toured with other people. I mean, one of the funny thing or interesting or again memorable things that like, you'll see Joan Baez with John Wesley Harding or the band with John Wesley Harding, just kind of like a funny kind of thing
Yeah,
to see. But you've recorded members with members of REM, the Elvis Costello's Attractions, Earl Slick, Denny Bonet, Al Perkins, Peter Case, Dave Alvin, Steve Earle, Jimmy Del Gilmore. You've you have quite a lot of friends, which and we'll talk about the Cabinet of Wonders in a little bit. But I wanted to talk to you about just a couple of particular collaborations. So you did Satellite of Love with Lou Reed and Rob Wasserman.
yeah.
Um, uh, what was it
That
like?
was Well, that was great.
Yeah.
So what happened was, I'll tell you the whole story. What happened was, I was on tour with Rob Wasserman. It was an odd combination, but we were just knew each other in San Francisco. So we went out with him playing the bass, obviously, and rest in peace, and me playing the guitar. We actually wrote some songs together in cities where I did well. It went well. In other cities, like there weren't that many people there. It was weird. I think I thought he had an audience that he kind of maybe didn't have. But that wasn't an issue. We had a fantastic time, and it was just the two of us and a terrific road manager called Bill Caulfield. We had a really lovely tour. A couple of the shows were a big deal because of the way Rob Wasserman was. He'd get his duo trio. You remember those
Yeah, yeah,
albums?
yeah, yeah,
So obviously Lou Reed was and a collaborator of his. Bizarrely, Howie Klein of Psy Records took me to the studio to see Lou Reed recording Drella
yeah. Mm,
in about 90, or was it New York? No, it was Drella in about 1990.
mhm.
That makes sense.
Early 90s, yeah.
And and Lou Reed he said, "Oh, I went to see Booker T and the MGs last night. It was so incredible." And I was like, "Oh God, I'd love to see Booker T." He's like, "You've never seen Booker T." So we went to see Booker T. So that was great. But when we got to New York on that tour, Rob Wassman said Lou's going to come down. So Lou came down to rehearsal, and we're going to do Dirty Boulevard, One for My Baby, and Satellite of Love. And so I knew Lou well enough. I'd done some gigs with him on various bills. He'd always been very nice to me. And I interviewed him for the Chicago Tribune one time. He and I did an interview kind of together. It was meant to be, but obviously I was interviewing him. And so I've got to answer the door. There's somebody banging on the door right here. There's no way I can get out of it. Just play the music and I'll be right back.
And we're
Apologies.
back.
Apologies. Workman, a tree fell through my house at the
Oh
beginning of the
God.
summer.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Um,
I remember that. Oh my God. Yeah.
it's been a summer.
Yes.
So Lou comes down to the show and we do the sound check. And Lou is in a really bad mood. He's got this guy whose name was Struan or Stellan, who's like walking around the room, and Lou's playing one chord on the guitar over and over. And there was one moment when he goes, um, the monitor guy goes, "Would you like some more guitar?" or something like that. And Lou looks straight out into the audience and says to his guy, "Will you tell this fucking asshole to shut the fuck up?" Like the monitor guy's just like 3 feet to his left, but obviously Lou was kind of at his wits' end. And there was such a, we're at the bottom line. I used to do well. I used to like playing for Alan Pepper there. It was, and and I just couldn't stand the atmosphere. It
Mhm.
was awful. It's like I kind of like a good atmosphere. I like to be polite to the people around me. And this was obviously a very and two different MOs, if you know what I mean. But I said to Rob, I've got to say something to Lou because, and he was like, well, yeah, whatever you want, because he was quite deadpan. And so after the sound check, I say to Lou, we're so honored you're doing this show and we're so happy you're doing it. But when you come back, could you bring, I didn't say slightly sunnier attitude, but I just said, can we just have a nice time tonight? Because it's making me anxious, the whole thing. And he was completely silent, looking at me. And then he went, okay. And so he, he walked off and he came back to the show and it was fantastic. He did the 3 song. I did my solo stuff. Rob did his solo stuff. We played together. Up comes Lou Reed, 3 songs, end of the night. Mike Rathke was there playing guitar as well. It was fantastic. So we've got these, it couldn't have gone better. So we've got these tapes of that. And I heard the Satellite of, oh, I remember walking off stage and I said to Lou, I said, that was a good version of Satellite of Love. He went, oh, good, yeah. And I said, you forgot the bridge. And if you listen to that recording, he doesn't sing the bridge on it. We were ready to do the bridge, but he doesn't sing it. So anyway, ages later, I remember ringing him up and saying, hey, can I put that out as a fan club single? It's going to go out free to 250 people at Christmas on, 7-inch with a big hole in the middle. And he was like, yeah, it'd be great. So that was that. It was very, very enjoyable. I didn't really keep up with Lou towards the end of his life, but I was a huge, huge admirer, obviously, of course, of him and his work. And it was great to work with him. And it was strange always to see how incredibly polite and nice he was in private and when you were talking to him or when like a lady came into the room or something, just almost absurdly courteous and friendly. And then the moment there was a stranger there, he would just be a dick, kind of.
Yeah.
I saw it happen more than once. I've got terribly long stories. That's the
No,
that's
I love each and every one. Um, and so before I get to the next question, so you've taught at universities. Your parents were professors, Christopher and Molly, correct? I'm afraid
my
this.
mum wasn't. My mum wasn't. She was a singing teacher, but my dad what is he's still translating medieval Latin outside Lucca in Tuscany.
And so and you've done some teaching yourself.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that a little? Because I'm gonna
Yeah,
make a mistake.
how did the teaching start really? People just ask you to do things. You give a talk at some MFA thing about your novel or something in a way that they hope will be inspiring to aspirational students, and then you're asked to kind of teach a class in creative writing, which I never really wanted to do because I think basically people are only interested in talking about their own writing, like I mean, which is nothing wrong with that. But I always tried to sneak actually learning about literature in there. So I kind of pioneered, well, for whatever that's worth, this course of a history of the first chapters of novels throughout literature, from like early novels kind of telling you what they're going to do because no one knows what a novel is yet, to various approaches, Jane Austen, through the history of the novel. And I won't go into it, but I taught that course at Fairleigh Dickinson and Swarthmore, and I really enjoyed teaching that course. Around that time, because I was doing that stuff, Paul Muldoon, the poet, asked me if I'd teach a kind of songwriting, lyric writing, and song course at Princeton, which we did for 2 or 3 years. And in the COVID times, there's an incredible rare book museum called the Rosenbach in Philadelphia. It's one of the incredible book collections in America. All manuscripts of Ulysses and Dracula, and it's crazy great what this guy Rosenbach collected. And during COVID, they asked me if he'd seen me give a talk on David Copperfield, and he asked me if I'd like to teach a class on Copperfield. So I did. Then he said, what would I like to teach? So I taught a 12-month, 12 classes, one book a month, 12 books, course on Dance, the Music of Time by Anthony Pohl. And the most recent, I'm a bit of an 18th century
Fan.
studier, student, fancier. And so I then taught a class in Tristram Shandy, which is my favorite book. And I like teaching a lot. And oh, actually, I published this a few years ago, which is a collection I edited for Everyman Library.
Mhm.
And it's got a little intro by me, and then, things I picked by Carson McCullers and Catherine Mansfield and Herman Hesse and Nabokov and Turgenev and Katsuo Ishiguro and all kinds of people, all music stories. And I'm actually teaching a 3 class, one a month, more of a book club than a class, actually, because we're going to read those stories and discuss them. And that's through the Rosenbach Museum. So I kind of continue doing that in a kind of a only how it pleases me way, because I don't really want to be a teacher, but I really do like teaching. So, there you go.
So now at the well, so this is going to lead to Bruce Springsteen. So Bruce Springsteen had you again. These are things I read on the internet, and so already I said one
Yeah.
thing that was incorrect, or a
Yeah.
couple things are incorrect.
Some are true, some are not.
Springsteen had you as an opening act in 1995. Like, is that? Yeah, and like the first time since the 70s, you haven't done the act.
Yeah, weird. That was
Yeah.
a whole weird story. One of the most exciting things, and all it's simultaneously one of the most disappointing things, because he was going on tour for Tom Joad.
Mhm.
To cut a very long story, oh, and he was going solo.
Right.
To cut, which was the first time ever. I mean, right? I don't think
Right.
Springsteen had gone
Since he had
solo
a
since he was
recording.
a
Yeah.
kid,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Right.
So he's going out solo, and he'd seen me play at McCabe's. He played with me at McCabe's. Me meeting him's a long story, but involves Dave Marsh having been a fan of my stuff, me knowing the San Francisco writer Joel Selvin,
Mm.
me going to see that band Rock Bottom Remainders, that was Stephen King and all those people. They did a show in LA. Me happening to be standing at the back of the room to make fun of and honor Joel Selvin on the stage there, as Springsteen was there to do the same for Dave Marsh and was just about to get on stage and do, you know, Diddy Wah Diddy or whatever was going to be the fun cover version that they closed with. That's how I met him. He'd heard of me. We had an amazing conversation standing at the back of the hall about the first time you get your first record and you pull it out of the sleeve and that feeling. And I was like, wow, I remember thinking, it's just like the kind of thing he'd say on stage. You know what I mean? It's like, it was quite a lot to get my head around. Then he very kindly started inviting me to like his stuff, like a birthday party or something like that. And we were friendly. Um, and so he asked me to do the open. I remember I was in London and my agent rang up and said, so Bruce Springsteen's agent just rang and they'd like you to open the Ghost of Tom Joad tour around the world. And I was like, they what? Whoa. I mean, I think I'd just got my marching orders off Sire around then.
Yeah.
Oh no, that was earlier than that, actually. That was earlier than that. That was when he played with me at McCabe's.
Mm.
And so anyway, so that was like great. And there was a slow drip, drip, drip of not a lot of information, but I suddenly had to do rather big things. Like I was like, I'm going to need a road manager for this tour. And I actually employed quite a famous guy in Dylan world who I very much hope is still around because he was a great guy, a guy called Arthur Rosato.
Mm.
And my friend Joel put me in touch with him because I needed somebody who was at a good level of being able to deal with a world that was not a world I was used to, of turning up at McCabe's in time for a cup of coffee and a muffin. So but there wasn't a lot of information coming through, and I began to not worry about it, and finally my agent rang up and go, they've been doing the official line, and I mean I don't know that it's true or not true. He said they've been running the show and it's way too long for these unioids. Bruce is going to play for 2.5 hours, even though it's solo. And anyway, so it ended up not happening. But as a kindness, they said, well, why don't you come and be the opening act at San Francisco? They're your local shows. And I think maybe it was already advertised or it had been in the press or something. So that's how that happened. I mean, just a very strange and memorable thing. Lots of memories of all those feelings of excitement, feeling rather sick when I remember feeling rather ill when I found out it wasn't going to happen. I remember kind of lying down and going, I really need a moment now. I mean, it probably wouldn't have made any difference to anything except I'd have traveled around the world opening for Bruce Springsteen. Who knows what that's like? It probably could be the most depressing experience in the world. But it is true that I was his first opening act since Redbone.
And there's a recording and video of you doing Wreck of the Highway with him.
Yeah, that's from McCabe's. There's also a recording of us doing that from Fairleigh Dickinson when I engineered this symposium with him and Robert Pinsky, the Jersey poet whom I worked out had been born in the same hospital, which was very strange. And that was a beautiful afternoon. I think we played it again there and somewhere else as well. I can't remember.
Okay, so we're going to take a break here because I realize I'm running out of time. So we're going to take a break and we're going to come right back.
Okay.